Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is just a continuance of my wig making series. What I'm going to show you now is how I go about applying the wefts to the wig. I've already installed the frontal and you all have already seen that. Yeah, without further ado, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow me on my other social media. But yeah, instead of prolonging this discussion, let's get to the video. So what I'm going to do first is start at the base of my wig with my 12-inch bundle or weft. And I'm just going to take my weft, and initially with the first weft, I'm just going to loop, and I'm going to continue with this U curve up until I get about right here, at which point I will eventually start to go across like so. So what I typically do to get a fuller unit is take my wefting and I like to double them. This is how I ensure that my wigs are full, and it's easier for me to, believe it or not, detangle my hair when the hair is a lot fuller. So I'm just going to start at about here, loop around, and just make my way up. Now, instead of using scissors, what I like to do for hair like this that may shed a lot is use a blade to cut it, and then again go over it with my liquid stitch at the end like that. And don't worry about it being white. Eventually it's going to dry clear. Now at the ends, what I like to do is go through the wefting. Again, this may make your hair shed just a tiny bit more, but it's something that I like to do to secure, to ensure that my wefting is secured down. But again, I'm going to go over it with the adhesive to try and limit that shedding as much as possible. So now I'm moving on to the 14-inch. And as you see, I ended the 12-inch at this point, like around the center. I typically do that so that I could start pulling that U up. Like whenever I went around and I curved it, it starts to level it out to make it a little bit more straighter. And if this were straight hair, I would stop double wefting around this area and just do single wefts and double weft in the middle. I might show you that in another video whenever I do utilize straight hair. But for now, what I'm going to do is start pushing this U shape up more to start bringing it to like a straighter level. All right, so now that I'm done with the 14-inch, I'm about to go in with the 16-inch. And for the most part, what I'm going to do is angle these upward until they connect here at the top perfectly. And what I'm going to do up here is just use one track rather than double wefting them. Now for this part, what I'm going to do is create small stitches. That way, whenever I'm combing through the wig, it doesn't, like I don't snag a thread. So I'm creating small stitches, but I'm still making sure that I tie knots in every stitch that I do. And I press down to make sure that I lock those knots in as well. Now again, if this hair was straight, at this point, I would just use one, like a single weft, rather than two of them. And that's because I want it to be as flat as possible. But because this is curly and it's going to be voluminous everywhere else, it doesn't make sense to inconvenience myself by doing a single weft on it. So at this point, what I'm going to do is sit and let this wig dry for about probably a few hours before I go in and just remove any excess hair from the frontal using the same method that I did with, not the frontal, the wig, using the same method that I did with the frontal. And that should also define the curls just a little bit more. Not that they aren't already, but it will eventually define the curls. Now that everything is completely dry, like all of the glue is completely dry on the wig, what we're going to do is prep this wig for install. More than likely, I'm going to try and install it today. We shall see. But what I'm going to use first is this water that I'm going to use to detangle the hair and remove any excess hairs that have shed since I created the wig. But first I need to remove this braid before I get started with that process. Alright, so now that that is done and the braid's taken out and I've combed it out a little bit, I'm just going to spray this hair all over. And this also moisturizes the curly hair. So I'm just going to spray it all over and saturate it just a little bit. Just enough so that I could get my fingers through it, and then so that I could define these curls back to how they once were. Now that I'm done with that, I'm just going to take some argan oil into my hands, rub it in, and then just seal in this moisture with the oil. and remove the shed hair. Right now, in total, this is what I ended up with, which, to be honest, isn't much considering this hair is curly, but also the shedding decreased because I did seal each one of the wefts as I was going about the sewing process. So that's definitely something that I want to recommend for those of you that are trying to decrease the amount of shedding you get from your curly haired wigs. Now, before I go on with styling this wig, I'm going to remove this excess cap from the wig. That way I can see what it's looking like before I continue with my styling process. So I'm just going to cut it as close to the lace without cutting any of the thread off of the wig. So now that that is complete and I'm loving what it is that I'm seeing, what I'm going to do is take this wide tooth comb and this water again and just continue to spray the hair down. And I'm just going to use this comb now to define the curls just a little more and detangle the hair. And again, removing any excess shed hair that I may receive. I want to treat this curly hair similar to your natural hair. So start at the ends and then work your way up. All right, and even from combing, this is how much shedding I received, which is absolutely amazing. Boy, John, I'm gonna wear the shit out this wig. It's a little short little number too. It reminds me of my old school one that I created back in Carbondale when I first learned how to make wigs. My first ever wig. Now what you're gonna do is measure the length of your elastic band. The one that I'm using is whatever this brand is from Walmart. And what you're going to do is from ear to ear, behind your ear to the nape of your head, you're going to measure from your ear all the way around to your other ear above the ear. So say my ear is here. I'm going to measure above my ear, pull it around like so, and do the same thing to the other side to come up with the length of my band. So this is what I came up with. And what I'm going to do is cut this off. So at this point, what we're going to do now is, again, make sure the wig is as taut as possible. And you're going to go, for me personally, because I always adhere my wigs, I start where the wig cap is, the dome cap, and then I go above this band here because that's where my ear is personally, like around this area. So I go above that approximately 1.5 inches, and I put the elastic band on top of this part as well as on top of the lace, and then I sew it down. You don't want to sew too tight because you don't want to rip holes into your lace. And you want to do the same thing to the other side. So what I typically like to do is either flip it over like so, or just go behind the wig cap like this. Take one of my T-pins to make sure that this does not move. Push it through and do the same thing to the other side. All right, so now that that part is complete, what you would do at this point is try your wig on to make sure that it fits the way that you want it to fit. And then the bands are where you want them to be. Now, if your bands end up being too tight or in an incorrect position, what I would suggest is just popping the thread and then just redoing it according to where you feel the wig best fits your head. And then if it's too loose, instead of doing all of that, what I would suggest is just sewing down this portion of the band until it fits your exact tightness. I just find that that's just the easiest way for me to do it.